Okay. We're here at Jazz Live with Andy Bay. Andy, thank you for being with us tonight at Jazz Live.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So, can you tell us the last time you were in San Diego? Have you been here and played before?
Only with different situations. I was here back in the late 70s with Lonnie Liston Smith's Cosmic Echo. I was subbing for his brother at the time, Donald Smith, who used to sing with the group.
So it's been a while since you've been in town.
But I was here in '96 for an AIDS walk, and I came here with a friend of mine, Beth Nilsson Chapman.
That name sounds familiar.
Well, she's from Nashville. She writes a lot of great songs and things with different people. She knows Bonnie Raitt and all those people. And somehow my producer knows her because he did some work for her, you know. And I was here during that. That was 90s, I guess 97.
Right.
You know, and that was the only time.
Well, it's great to have you here at Jazz Live, and it's awesome to have you in a solo setting, just you at the piano and you and your voice. Does that, do you particularly like that setup? Is that something that you like to do, rather than, for instance, playing with your trio, you know, the people that you've recorded with?
I like the trio, and I definitely like solo. Because I've done a lot of solo work. My first CD that I supposedly came back in '96 was a solo CD, Ballads, Blues, and Bay. And I like working solo because it does allow me a certain amount of freedom in other ways. But a trio can be just as, just as great because of the different dynamics and the interaction with other musicians.
As someone who observes a lot of artists doing shows, it seems like it's a little bit harder to do a solo show in that you kind of have to rely on yourself, and also you have to, just from a sheer logistics, kind of have to stretch the time for a show, you know, so that you have a time that you need. Do you find that as a challenge?
It can be a challenge, but, you know, I've done it a lot in the past, you know, so you find ways. I mean, sure, I always tell different interviewers when they ask me, you know, playing solo. I mean, with me, it's always like the piano is like a dialogue for the voice. It's not like I'm accompanying myself. It's just an integral part of, you know, leaving space for the voice and leaving space for the piano, and like, you know, juxtaposing those energies together where they complement each other, but not necessarily da 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 da. I'm playing behind myself. I like to have make a little dialogue, rhythmic dialogue. You know.
That's really interesting because that's kind of how it seems like you are when you're with, you know, other musicians and you're playing.
Right. So that's what makes me even stronger when I play with the rhythm section, because I think of playing with the rhythm section when I'm playing by myself.
Right. Well, let's talk about that then, about playing with the rhythm section. Your latest release is Ain't Necessarily So, and you play with the Washingtons, Peter on bass and Kenny on drums. Can you tell us a little bit about the disc and kind of what you were trying to do with Ain't Necessarily So?
Well, I had been doing It Ain't Necessarily So for quite a while, you know.
The tune in particular?
Oh, the tune.
Right, okay.
And when I started doing gigs with Peter and Kenny back in the, you know, not the early 70s, but I met the early 90s, but I met Kenny years ago when he was like a teenager, when he was playing with Walter Davis, and I hired him for some gigs. And later I met Peter Washington when I guess he was playing with Art Blakey and a few other people. I knew them, you know, basically, you know, on a pretty personal level. We didn't do that many gigs, but I did a few gigs with Peter and Vernal Fournier at Bradley's, you know, back in the early 90s. So I started working with them off and on, and by the time Ballads, Blues, and Bay came out, it was around that time when I got the gig at Birdland, you know, and we did a gig. Well, it had already been out, because I had gotten some reviews in '96, and we did a gig in May of '97 at Birdland. So I used them. You know.
So, with this collection of tunes that you recorded for this particular disc, were you trying to put these together for a disc, or were these kind of just some chestnuts that you had done that you were doing that sounded good, or were you in particular shooting for this when you were, recording?
Well, it was stuff that I had already done, because I had been doing these songs, like Pick Yourself Up and all that. There's other material from that period,
Right.
So it was just something, it was just a matter of me working with two great musicians.
Mhm.
And Vito Leschek is playing on a couple of tracks
Right.
when Kenny wasn't available. He's somebody that I met in Graz, in the 90s. But it was just something that it was songs that I had been doing for years and years. And they felt comfortable, stuff like, All the Things You Are and Hey Love. And because I do a lot of those kind of tunes, even though I write and I do a lot of original music, which I haven't done that much of in a while. But that's what I'm aiming for now, as well as doing some Thelonious Monk. But this is just music that I love to play.
Mm-hmm.
Those tunes like It Ain't Necessarily So and Brother Can You Spare a Dime, which I'm a little tired of because I've done them so
Right.
I've done them so long,
Mm-hmm.
it's for so many years. But you can still find something in them, if you're creating something, if you're trying to create something at the moment, and depending who you're playing with,
Right.
which can give you that energy,
Have you had a chance to listen to that? And what I'm kind of interested in is potentially your comparison of how you were playing then in '97, because that was actually recorded in '97, and your either your playing or your outlook now in 2008 now. Do you notice any differences between that? Are there some things that you think like you've improved on in that time in comparison?
I think so. I'm sure it's a big difference. I mean, there's still some basic things that I'm about, but I think I've kind of gotten some better focus on certain things vocally and pianistically.
Can you explain? Can you tell us maybe a little bit of what those things are? Or
I think my voice has more. The way I sing now, which is sort of like what I'm doing on that record at the time, I'm using more textures, more head and chest, more, tonal things in my singing, and more dynamics, more softer dynamics, more mid-range, more, everything is, well, I don't want to say everything is better, but I think I've grown.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've grown. I think pianistically I've grown because I'm still working on things.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't get I haven't had a chance to really work with a trio as much of late, even though I'm doing a lot of trio stuff now because of the record.
Mm-hmm.
But I was doing a lot of stand-up stuff with guitar, which I'm not doing anymore. Because I really want to. I've been trying to focus on the piano for years, even when I was doing the other things with my producer. But I'm just trying to grow from a pianistic and a vocal, situation.
So there's still things that you hear yourself that you're trying to get out on the piano that you haven't gotten to yet.
No, because these are things I've been working on for like 40 years or more.
Right.
Like different, because I'm into 12-tone rows and skips and intervals. I had a little classical training, so I know how to. If you hear some of those odd intervals that I play from time to time, that's from me studying the piano.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting. You'd bring up that you're doing some monk stuff too, and that kind of jives with what you're saying there, where you're kind of looking at odd intervals and.
Well, I've always been. I mean, even ever since high school. I mean, I've always loved Monk and Bud Powell and Hank Jones, and Earl Garner. And of course Art Tatum. And I've listened to a lot of piano music, all types of piano players.
When speaking of that, then when you were growing up, was music a part of your early upbringing? I know you later were playing in groups with your sisters, but in your earliest years, was music a big part of growing up in your family?
Oh yeah, I was playing before I was 5 years. I'll say trying to play before I was 3 years old.
Really?
'Cause I was banging, before I was 2.
Mm-hmm.
And the piano always held a strong fascination for me, you know, because there was always one in the house, and my father could play. You know, he played. He had some classical training, and he could sing. And he had a brother that sang and played piano on the local radio show. Because I was born in 1939, so I came up listening, hearing music, and my mother played a little piano by ear, you know, and she had older sisters who sang in church, and a lot of my father's brothers on his side, his kinfolks played and sang in church, and you know, but they never became professional, you know. But they had some. They were very literate in terms of, you know, especially my father. He could read music, you know.
So where did you then get the idea to make music, you know, in a professional way instead of just as your family had done, you know, kind of as you were growing up?
Well, I became a child prodigy. I mean, by the time, you know, banging before I was 2 years old, and then, you know, just kind of keep doing it by ear. I was like a sponge, you know. I heard music on the radio, and I would emulate stuff.
Where was this?
Newark, New Jersey.
Newark, New Jersey. Okay,
yeah,
I'm
Newark,
sorry.
New Jersey. Yeah. And so it was always music around. I mean, I didn't know how talented I was, but evidently I must have had some talent, because my father was always taking me around and showing me off to his kinfolks and his friends, and my sisters would take me to around, you know, and even take me to the bars where people before I was 6 years old, and have me play my little version of Boogie Woogie, or singing Louis Jordan's Caledonia or whatever. And I had like a rival. Well, actually, this other kid was from Philadelphia. His name was Sugar Child Rovatzos. And he made movies. Like, he was like around 6 years old. He went to California. And I met somebody that wanted to do the same thing with me. But then I had gotten sick, and I got the whooping cough or something. And then I had to go to the hospital. So that was like a setback. And I think that all my life has been like ups and downs. I mean, I'm not saying that I was a child tragedy.
Right.
But
Prodigy, then tragedy.
But I had all these ups and downs. But to make a long story short, with each setback, I got stronger. And that's been my whole life, you know, like these ups and downs with all the little things, all the little letdowns, or whatever you want to call them. I always stayed with the music for some reason. And this is why I kept developing through the years. I went from, you know, like from 3 to 13, like I always say, from 3 to 13 to 23 to 33 to 43 to 53, and a little past 63 now.
So then what do you kind of consider your first professional jazz gig where you were like, wow, I'm really doing what I want to be doing, Ken?
I would say, you know, it's hard to say, because once I got to high school, I was like, I think when I was on the Star Time Kids, it was a variety show.
In Newark?
No, it was in but even though they had some shows in Newark, but
Right.
this was a TV show that used to come on Channel 4 in New York. And they discovered me, the guy that took me to the show discovered me on a show called Spotlight on Harlem, which came on Channel 13. It was the Ralph Cooper show, who was a big man back in the day. You know, he worked with Billie Holiday and all these people. And he was like the MC of this show. And I was on this show. Somehow me and my sisters were on the show. And they sang duets, and I played for them. I could accompany very well in my teens. And I sang one song, I think one of Billy Eckstine's tunes, that I heard him sing in a motion picture, where he sang a song where we know how like they used to have artists singing one tune.
Right.
And he sang this song called Hold Me Close to You, and he had this shirt on where they called Mr. B collar. But I remember the song, you know, I remember it as best as I could at that time, because he was one of my heroes. So I sang this song, and it landed me, somebody was in the audience, and they took me to this kids show called the Star Time Kids that Connie Francis was on, and a lot of other talented kids. So I was like a regular for maybe over a year, and we used to go up to the Catskills, and I would play and sing on the piano sometime, but then I would stand up and sing, because it was like a variety show. And at that time, I was really influenced heavily by jazz, you know, by Sarah and Nat and all that. But I was influenced by the music even before I was a teenager, because my sisters had records.
Right.
They had Charlie Parker and Ella and, you know, all the blues artists and, you know, Dizzy Gillespie. And so I had, you know, I was exposed to a lot of all of that music, you know, as a kid.
Well, before we run out of time, I really would like to talk to you about the things you've got coming up in the future. Are there particular places you're planning on playing, you know, from here, or are you working in particular on any albums with any groups? Kind of what can we look for in the future?
I will be doing a lot more playing, you know, because I want to play a lot more. But I'm still working on piano concepts, and I would, you know, I would like to sing a lot more of my own material, which I'm working on, and maybe some Monk stuff, because I did a tribute to Monk at Duke University on his 90th anniversary, October the 10th. And there's a lot of things, taking one day at a time, and there's no plan, you know, because, you know, sometimes when you planning is, sometimes you might have to kind of like let things go for a while, and then, you know, and get involved in what you're doing now, because one never knows, but one always has a focus. I always have a focus on what I want to do.
Excellent. Well, it's fantastic to have you here in San Diego. Great to have you back here now and performing tonight at Jazz Live. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.